If you could explain to us sort of your musical influences growing up in North Carolina and then moving to New York, and how that manifested itself in your singing style.
I would imagine my musical influences was like most coming out of the South was the Baptist church. Really, I from what my mother was telling me, I was in church singing at the age of 10, and my father decided to go into the restaurant business, and he moved to New York when I was about 12. And in New York, I was excited about the music in New York because the only music that I was more or less involved with in the South was either country and western or hillbilly music, as we used to call them when I was a kid, and gospel. There was no in between. And when I got to New York, all the other musics that's in the world just came into my head, whether it was the classics, jazz. I never knew what jazz was about or had heard anything about jazz. Great singers like Billy Eckstine and Nat King Cole. My mother would just go buy thousands of records by them and things like that. So when I got to New York, I found all this other music outside of hillbilly and gospel that really just started my whole brain into a whole musical thing.
Did you? I read somewhere that you talked about street corner harmonizing, and that you would just have to walk by a group of kids singing, and you.
Doing street, we call it doo-wop. Doing doo-wop came about when I was in my teen years, like between maybe 13 or 14 until I was about 18 years old. That started when I was in school. I met a couple of school pals that were singing, and they found that I could sing a bit, and I joined the group, and we started singing on the corners. See, the whole thing about doo-wop wasn't just singing, it was to get girls. See, if you sound good, see, it's like, don't frown. If you sound good, girls follow. Nothing to do with you personally, but that's how it happened then. If you sound really nice, and from each block, like I was with a bunch of guys out of 118th Street and 8th Avenue, so we would challenge guys all up and down that area. And girls found out that we were like good, and they would follow. And of course, whatever neighborhood we'd go to, the girls in that neighborhood would become impressed because we were bringing girls with us. Girls are amazing, aren't they?
In some ways, yeah. Now, can you tell us how you first came to be a drifter?
Oh, wow. I I was working with my dad in a restaurant. He had a restaurant on 119th Street and 8th Avenue. There was a fellow across the street that was managing a lot of local groups, and his name was Lover Patterson. He had a group called the Five Crowns, which made some nice records, just local hits. And he was looking for a baritone singer. He heard that I could sing, so he came across the street. And I wasn't interested, so he tried to influence some of my friends to join the group and stuff like that. So he left and came back a week later, and finally I accepted the fact that, okay, I'll join your group. And my father said, it's okay as long as I do my share of work in the store. I went over and rehearsed with the group, and we found ourselves at the Apollo Theater as an opening act. I think Ray Charles was headlining the bill, and had, of course, the Drifters was on the bill. And during that week, while we were there with the Drifters, they were breaking up. They was having manager problems. And their manager approached Mr. Patterson and asked them would we, who were the Five Crowns, like to become the new set of Drifters. So a lot of people were under the impression that I actually joined the Drifters, and I didn't. All the guys that I was with as the Five Crowns became the new set of Drifters, you know. Although I loved the Drifters, they were a great group. Because before even being involved with the name Drifters, I used to go to the Apollo because I could afford a ticket in the balcony. I used to go all the way up in the balcony and watch them perform. So for me to really be a Drifter was like completely out of my... I just didn't ever believe I'd become a Drifter.
It must have been an awesome step.
Yeah, it was, really. It was a great responsibility. You know, the thing that happened that we weren't aware of in becoming a Drifter is that we took on the responsibility of having to record under their name, do all their personal appearances and all that, and that was the hard part.
The schedule. So the first song that you recorded with the new Drifters was "There Goes My Baby," am I right?
The first recording we made as the Drifters was "There Goes My Baby," and From what I was told, Jerry Wexler hated the record a lot. It was new. It was something that Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller had came up with a new concept for black music and black singers, and it took off and it never turned back. It was the first time that strings was used successfully in the recordings such as that. And I wrote the song, but it had nothing to do, from the time that I wrote it, with anything that I had planned for the record. I mean, their whole arrangement and concept of the song "There Goes My Baby" has nothing to do with what I actually heard when I first wrote it. They just took it, and the only thing I own about the song is the lyrics, because their arrangement was completely left field. There's nothing to do with gospel at all, the way they arranged it, you know. So.
How'd you first hear it?
Of course, it was in the studio when I first heard it, and it was so much going on, and you have to try to imagine it during those times in the studio. It wasn't as it is today, where you have one synthesizer and maybe three musicians. Everybody was there, from the string players to the kettle drums to the background singers, and of course myself along with the group. So we were all there at one time performing, and it was just so much going on that I knew something strange was happening, but I just could not complain, because it was going well, and it felt right. Although it sounded strange, but it felt right. So I went along with it, because I didn't know that the Drifters before us wasn't doing this, and I was all new to the recording. So when I got into the studio and all this was there, and all that was going on, and the arrangers were there, and the producers were there, and the company owners were there, I just say, well, this is probably what the other Drifters must have been doing, so I just had to go with it, yeah.
I just ran out of film.
Change film.
So, what were your first impressions of Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller as producers on "There Goes My Baby"?
I would believe that my first impression with Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, I was so young then, as we all were, I guess. They were very positive about what they wanted. I think that's what impressed me the most. And being a kid out of the South and being put in a position where there are extremely talented musicians. I've never learned to read music or anything like that. And to be in their company where everything you can watch them doing makes sense, you know? And as I was telling you earlier about "There Goes My Baby," for instance, the way I really had wrote "There Goes My Baby" was with a song similar to a song that was recorded by a singer by the name of Dee Clark. He had a song, "I don't want nobody else but you, and no one thrills me the way you do." And I said, "There goes my baby, moving on down the line." I was there. But when I got to Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, they went to the kettle drums, don, don, da, 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 da. I said, oh my God, what do I do with this thing here? But they said, okay, it's a 4-bar intro. And I didn't know nothing about counting bars. And they showed me, so it says count, 1, 2, 3, 4. So they taught me how to count bars, and they said it's a 4-bar intro, and then start singing. And all that's going in my mind, at the same time I have all these strings getting ready to do bits and pieces, and the kettle drums going. So I was a bit off, but I knew once I started singing, it was their problem to fix. It wasn't mine. All I have to do is, he said, count 4 bars and start singing. So I said, okay, then after I do that, I shouldn't worry anymore. Surely enough, I counted 4 bars and started singing, and it was like I would imagine a mother feels when she's rocking her baby. Everything was so comfortable and easy and sweet, and there was no problems. The song went straight down, no problems. See, and I was not scheduled to be the lead singer, and I guess I was nervous. I wrote the song, but the lead singer was Charlie Thomas. And because he was having trouble with the lyrics, that's how I became a lead singer. Anyway, I was never supposed to be a lead singer, ever. There was never should have been a Benny King in life, because I was a baritone singer. I was the one that did the steps and watched the girls while the other guys had the responsibility of making the song happen. I was not that guy. I had no intentions of being that guy. But as luck would have it or not, Charlie Thomas couldn't do the song. Jerry Wexler got upset about it and said, "Who wrote the song?" And they pointed at me. And they said, "Well, if he wrote it, let him sing it." And that's when I started getting all these instructions from Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller of how to get into the song. And they were brilliant. I mean, Jerry and Mike, as people, they were warm. They knew how to handle a singer. They knew how to make you feel comfortable. And as well, I knew something was happening with the music because of them. They were certain of what they wanted to do with what this new sound that they were making. No one was screaming in there, it's horrible. I think the thing came about with Jerry Wexler was after the thing was done, after There Goes My Baby was done. It was just so new, and he said this was wrong and that was wrong. He found all the negative things about it, but it just came out of the box and went straight up without anybody having to pump it or push it at all.
So you knew at the time that something really new, some synthesis was happening, something really new was going on.
I think the thing about this business is that you take a chance to do something and you realize in your heart it's either going to be the greatest thing that ever happened or the worst thing that ever happened. It won't be an in-between, I almost made a hit. It'll be an instant flop or an instant success. And that's what Jerry and Lieber are about. They've always been like Jerry Lieber, Mike Stoller. They've always been like that. It's either going to be an instant success or an instant flop. There's no in between with them. Very few things have been in between.
Let's see. Just the strings. I'm going to move on to Save the Last Dance for Me.
Okay.
Now, Jerry had told us a story about Doc Thomas, the writing of that song. Are you familiar with that?
Let me see which one he knows, and I'll tell you which one I know.
Okay. The Doc had written it for his, because he used to go to the dance floor and
That's
watch his
right.
wife dancing with other men.
That's
He
right.
was, of course, wheelchair bound. How did you feel about that song when you first heard it? And how did that feeling, what kind of feeling did you bring to the singing of that song in the performance?
I think when I worked with Doc Thomas and Mort Schumann, and especially on Save the Last Dance for Me, the thing that impressed me most about Doc Thomas is that although you knew he couldn't walk, I felt he could. He had a lot of energy and a lot of sincerity about his writing and a lot of positiveness about show business, and he just felt great about all the music that had been created before he was in the business and after and during. And when I did Save the Last Dance, I thought too of the story that the reason he wrote the song, which was because his wife was dancing and he would take her out and he couldn't dance with her. And when I performed the song at the studio to record, there are very few songs that I've recorded that I knew or even would allow myself to say, I know this is a hit. Save the Last Dance was one of them. That once I finished the song, I knew it was a hit. How long it would remain a hit is another story, but I knew it would be a hit. Yeah.
What was it that made you know it was a hit?
Because he gave me more than lyrics. He gave me a reason why the song was born. When you go into a studio and you get a song from a writer and you don't have anything other than what he wrote, he could have done that not even from his experience, from anybody's experience. But because I knew this was actually from the experience that Doc himself had felt, and this was very personal, I just closed my eyes in front of the microphone and I could see him watching his wife as she was dancing, and I could sing the song because now the whole complete picture of the song and the reason it was written was all in my head.
It really comes out in the delivery.
Thank you.
There's something about more technically about Save the Last Dance. They're a sort of distinctive Latin rhythm. There's a lot of orchestra, and it's sort of a trademark of that era, I think, of Lieber and Stoller production. Was it a challenge, or was it an adjustment for you to sing with all that stuff going on in the background?
I think that the reason why I was comfortable with Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller doing the Latin arrangements and things like that, like I was telling you before, I was raised 116th Street and 8th Avenue. Only 5 blocks to the east was the East Side, which a lot of Hispanics were there. And that's where I used to go a lot to pick up things from my dad. So the music of that I was very familiar with. And not only being familiar with, I enjoyed the music rhythmically. So when Jerry and Mike was doing those arrangements, I wasn't uncomfortable because I was familiar with the sound and the feel of that rhythm. My only problem with that was to make sure that I could sing that. See, like I said, it was a far cry from good gospel to singing, you can dance every dance with the guy who gave you the eye, little more, but don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be. That's a lot. See, we would just, in church, you don't do all that movement with the mouth. You just you go from the heart and you slow yourself down and you get involved with people. But here, my mouth became an instrument. I'm doing, so darling, say the last dance for me. I'm all up. My mouth is completely going crazy here. And it was new to me because of that. And it was very hard as a black singer to actually get a good feeling out of the lyrics because they were moving so fast. Most black singers like to slow the word down and go directly to your heart. We're not interested in your ears. We just want to go directly to your heart. So once Jerry and Mike got a hold of me, they changed my whole attitude about the feeling of music, and that I can not only get into people's heads and hearts with the words, but I can also deliver it and make them feel what I'm saying, which I thought I'd never be able to do, really. But it was because of them and their faith in me and the way they was instructing me of how to do this. I was able to more or less do the both things, rhythmically and feeling.
Do you remember their instruction at all?
Yeah, we would sit down. Jerry Lee and myself would sit down at the piano for hours and hours and hours, and we would go through this song. And I would explain to him, I said, I hear what you're doing. I said, but I would like to do it this way. He said, it won't fit. I said, but if we do it, it's slow. He said, it won't fit. I'm always trying to get him to slow things, and he said, it won't fit. We get into the studio after fighting with him and losing. We get into the studio, and he'll get the band together, and we have what we call a run through of all the things that we want to do with this particular song. And after I get there and I hear the run through, and again I have to say he's right. So after about the 3rd or 4th time of him and I fighting with each other, not really loudly, or just what's your opinion kind of thing, I learned that in most cases he was right, because he was using my voice as an instrument. It was up to me to find the feeling in what I was doing. And that's one of the things I've always credited them for, my learning how to approach different songs, yet not losing the feeling of the song, and yet putting my own feelings in it to deliver to the people. One of the hardest things in the world is to perform on record and get someone to enjoy and feel what you're doing. It's unlike TV. You can fake it with the face and the crying and the bits. Recording is completely different. We have to make sure you like everything we are doing and saying between Jerry Lee, Mike Stoller, and myself, and the studios we use to convince you to buy this product. And it's not an easy task. But he taught me one great lesson. If you just concentrate on what you're doing and allow yourself to actually enjoy and let your feelings come out, whatever the tempos, whatever the rhythms, whatever the songs, 9 out of 10 times it'll work. And I've taken that lesson to me, to thousands of studios with me.
So just one more time.
One more time.
That Leiber and Stoller influenced your vocal style.
Yeah.
Just show us and tell us how they did that.
Well, I would imagine if there's a way of showing you how my vocal style was influenced by Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, was like coming out of the gospel, you do things like, nearer, my God, to thee, oh, nearer to thee, nearer to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, oh, nearer, my God, to thee. And then they would take me and say, do this song. There is a rose in Spanish Harlem, a red rose up in Spanish Harlem. It is the special one, it's never seen the sun. It only comes out when the moon is on the run and all the stars are gleaming. I said, you gotta be joking. I would look at them like they was absolutely mad, but yet and still, once I would do it with the band, with the strings, it all made sense. And whatever I was feeling when I was singing Nearer My God to Thee or anything else in church, I can actually find the same feeling when I'm doing There's a Rose in Spanish Harlem. And they taught me that it's not what you're singing, it's how you're feeling when you're singing it. And I don't care what studio I'm in. I don't care what producer is producing me. And I don't care what song it is. Because they've taught me those things, I feel so protected wherever I go as far as music.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So, why'd you quit the Drifters when the Drifters were doing so well?
Why don't you? You know, to tell you the truth, I didn't quit the Drifters. Everybody assumed that, everybody always asked me as well, said, did you quit the Drifters? And I always say, no, I didn't really quit the Drifters. What happened with my situation with the Drifters, we were all young kids out of Harlem, and when we signed our first contract, because we didn't have any lawyers around, we signed a contract that we made, I think it was $125 a week. Regardless of how many hits we had, we never collected any money on those hits. So all we got when we first started was $125 a week. Out of the $125 a week, we had to keep our uniforms clean, we had to pay for our own meals, and send money home. And we got on a tour, and we had a hit record. And yet still, we were still getting $125 a week. And we had all these other expenses to kind of keep things going. And at the time, I had just gotten married, and I tried to send home some money to my wife, and it just didn't work. So we were all very unhappy. I think the thing that hurt us most is that we did have a #1 record out, and we didn't know that we shouldn't have signed a contract because we were just so excited to become the new Drifters and things like that. So things happened. But we were complaining just to get a raise in salary. So we got back to New York off a tour one day. We called up the manager, and we told him how unhappy we were, and we'd like to meet with him. He said, okay, well, he set a time. We all came down to New York, and we had this great meeting. They selected me to be the spokesman. I would imagine they did that thinking that he wouldn't fire the lead singer. They were wrong. He fired the lead singer. He told me, he said, well, you stand over there and you speak for yourself. So I more or less stepped aside, and I said, okay, and I repeated the same thing. I said, well, myself, and I started to say to the group again, I said, well, I'm unhappy about the salary that I'm getting. I'd like to have a raise. And he said, I can't afford one. This is with a #1 record. And he said, so if you want to, you can stay or whatever. And he took his hands up like that. So I looked at the other guys that were sitting there, and I took the whatever, and I said, okay, and I walked out of the door. I stood on the side because it was a glass door there, and I stood on the side so they wouldn't see a shadow of me or anything, and nobody followed. I was out there for about 15 to 20 minutes waiting. No one came out. So at that time I said, well, you can go back in and apologize and take this $125. Or you can call it a day for show business. So I headed toward the elevator. The only person that followed me was the guy, Lover Patterson, who took us from the Five Crowns to make us the new Drifters. Because of him believing in me and staying behind me and thinking that I was worth getting up in the morning for, I happened to stay in the business. Other than that, I wouldn't have stayed that long. But because most singers do quit groups to launch a solo career, but that didn't happen in my case. I had once I got out of the group, I was finished. I was, I wasn't gonna do any more music stuff. I'd had enough of the pain and all the disappointment that goes along in music, and just short time with them, all the trickery. I all of it just got right into my life in a very short time of being with them, and I didn't really like it. I enjoyed singing. I love songwriting. I love recording. All those things that involves with creating music was great. I love that, and to this day I love that. But all the other bits was very ugly and slick, and I never adjusted to slick stuff in this business. And I was glad to leave that part of it. And when I got down to the elevator, myself with Lover Patterson, he said, "Well, what are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go back and work with my dad in the restaurant." And just, I was already a star in the ghetto anyway, so everybody thought I was big stuff because I had a few hits and stuff. So I'd always made a name for myself, more of a name than I thought I'd ever make in my life. I'd done something, And I think the thing that convinced me more than anything else to stay in the business, I woke up one morning and I had a dispossessed under my door, an eviction notice anyway. I went over to Lover Patterson and I showed him this eviction notice. I said, "Look," I said, "I have to stop this and get a job." I said, "Because these people are telling me within another 15 days they're going to throw me out of this apartment with my wife." He got up and he got every suit, every little ring, anything that you can possibly put together to get up some money. And he said, "Well, come on, go with me." And he went to the pawn shop and pawned all his stuff. From that moment till now, I was going to try my best to be a success for him. That was my first and last best friend in this whole wide world. And that was the first person that had convinced me that I was worth something. And that's how I made up my mind I'd stay in it for him more than for myself.
It was only the beginning.
It was only the beginning, exactly.
I just actually want to back up for one. I forgot one question about the Drifters. Was that when we were talking about Save the Last Dance for me, it crossed over in a big way. Pop charts. Obviously, it was a major hit, and it also made the Drifters sort of internationally famous.
Right.
What do you think it was about the sound of these records that made them do that made them so successful?
I would imagine, and like Save the Last Dance and a lot of the other Drifter songs did that great, it did something that everybody today dreams of having happen. It crossed over on its own. In other words, it took up an extremely wide population of record buying people, and it just never stopped. And the Drifters happened to fall over in that area. And basically, again, and it's not so much trying to pat them on the back, again, we have to allow that to be because of Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller's arrangements. We were so familiar with records sounding the same, and they were the only brave soldiers that would take a chance and make it different. And by them doing that, allowed everybody to just pick up on it and say, "Hey, here is something different," and it's not garbage. It's good. It's clean. It's quality, And they had. I always say, Jerry and Mike tailor-made suits for me when it comes to songs. It just fit perfectly. You didn't have to force it on anybody. It just was a perfect fit, and they knew how to do that.
Great answer. That's great. Let's see. Yeah.
We got 50 feet. It's a minute.
Do you want to? I think we should cut, actually.
Camera 67.
Can you tell me how you wrote? I mean, it's a pop classic, one of the great songs of all time. Can you tell me how you wrote "Stand By Me"? Where the inspiration for that came from?
I think that what happened when I wrote "Stand By Me," one of my favorite singers of all time would be Sam Cooke. He was with a group called the Soul Stirrers, and they had a song called Lord, I'm Standing By or something like that. And I just snipped that little bit out. And I went home one night and I grabbed my little guitar and I started playing around with that. And I started thinking about all the things that I love the most. And the stand word just popped in my head. And then I'd start writing. I just stand. And I just kept fiddling with that for about 20 minutes. And I just, all of a sudden, the title fell in place, Stand By Me. And just from that, I started writing a song, which didn't take me long at all to write it. You know, and the story about Stand By Me as well is that I was writing it, although I had more or less left the Drifters, I was still friendly with the guys because I could understand why they didn't come out of that door with me. And then we were still buddies. You know, for me to not be in a group and lose all my friends was a whole other thing. So we had kind of gotten our friendship back in gear, and I told him about this song that I wrote. And I took it down to Charlie Thomas's place and rehearsed it with the guys. They loved the song, and they said, look, we have to take it down to George, and we have to do it for him. So they took the song, and along with myself, we all went down to George's office. And here I am standing in there again, that I thought I'd never do. And the guys were singing the song. And after it was over, he lifted up his head and he looked at me. He said, Benny, it's not a bad song, but we don't need it. So I took the song and tucked it under my arm and left the office for the last time. I got to the studio to record with Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller. We had done a few songs and we had some time left over. And Jerry said, look, we have a few minutes left over. You have anything that you've written or whatever? And I showed him this song that I had written for the Drifters, but they didn't want it. He said, oh, it feels good. So he called all the musicians back in. We did it right then and there. We did what's called a head arrangement, like something real quick thrown together. And that's how Stand By Me was born. I would imagine if you hear the feeling in Stand By Me, people say, oh, you sound so sad. I was very sad because I had no intention of singing the song myself at all. Not at all. I had never even for a moment thought that I'd be recording Stand By Me. I just knew that the Drifters was going to hear it, like it, and record it. So when I showed it to Jerry and it just happened like that, I just sung it like that.
Was it the only song you did in that session, or was?
I think that was with the session we did, Spanish Harlem and a few others, if I'm not mistaken. So we came out of there with a few hits that day.
In 4 hours or something. That's what the
Yeah,
legend is.
that's right.
You recorded and started your whole solo career in 4
4 hours.
Pretty impressive. Do you remember Phil Spector being there on Spanish Harlem?
Phil Spector was in the studio doing a lot of recordings of the Drifter stuff. He was definitely there when we did Spanish Harlem. The bit that does that ding 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 ding. That's Phil Spector's trademark for Spanish Harlem. You know, he was very talented. I knew he was talented because he was one of the few that would walk over to Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller, and they would stop and listen. So I said, ha, somebody got something here.
Yeah, had courage.
Yeah.
Can we cut for 1 sec, John? Here's a question for John.
Okay.
So why do you think Spanish Harlem was a hit?
The thing that I like most about Spanish Harlem, the reason I think it was a hit, is because it was so different. And again, like I said earlier about Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller, when they go out to do something different, it's going to either be the greatest thing that ever happened, or it's going to just fail right away with no in between. And when I did Spanish Harlem, because, and again, you have to allow for the fact that they had a feeling at this point of how to record Benny King, and before this is coming out of the Drifters, and Spanish Harlem. Really, to be honest with you, again, I guess if there's a reason why I'm in this world is to be a singer, because I don't try to be. When I recorded Spanish Harlem, that should have been a Drifter song, because it was a snowstorm. I got to the studio to record. because Atlantic Records want me to continue the sound of the Drifters. So I made an arrangement with Jerry Wexler and Ahmet Ertegun that I would come in just for scale and do some more recording as if I was still in the group with the Drifters. So that was okay with me. I got into the studio by myself, and the other guys couldn't make it. And Spanish Harlem was in the session. So I did that, finished it, and Jerry Lee says, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Well, nothing really." I told him about the agreement that I made with Ahmet and all of them. And he said, "Well, what are you going to do about your career?" I said, "Well, nothing really." And I had no plans of doing anything. And he said, "Well, look, let me speak to them at Atlantic and see what could be done." He went to Atlantic, and he spoke to him, and he convinced them to let Spanish Harlem be my first sign as a solo artist. So if it wasn't for Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller, there would be no Benny King as well.
So, just back to that marathon session that really was a major change in your life.
Right.
How did these songs change your career?
I would imagine my career was changed by these songs because each song was different. One of the most rewarding things that I've been given by the producers and the writers and the company Atlantic, and they're not even aware of it, is that each song that they've ever given me has its own identity. And a song like Spanish Harlem, for instance, couldn't have been anything but a hit because it was just so strong in lyrics. It was one of those stories that make you think. Long before John Lennon, I'd say Spanish Harlem was the first thinking song. You know? There is a rose in Spanish Harlem, a red. You're not really talking about, are you talking about a rose or are you talking about a woman? A red rose up in Spanish Harlem, it rose, da 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 da. You know, it comes through the concrete. It's one of those songs. It was one of the first thinking songs. And because of the orchestration, it was one of the most brilliantly done arrangements. To this day, and I use horns when I use the arrangements, but it's just as beautiful. See, so each song that I got from Jerry Lee and Mike Stoller, whether it be Save the Last Dance, whether it be Spanish Harlem, whether it be This Magic Moment, whether it be I Count the Tears, There Goes My Baby, Stand By Me, I Who Have Nothing, Don't Play That Song. I get on stage and I can sing it, each one of them, and I'm not following any pattern because each has their own thing. And that's one of the greatest feelings in the world as a singer.
So it liberated you in a sense.
Yeah, gave me complete freedom.
Let's see. Oh, the sound of your recordings, you know, both on your own and also with the Drifters, were hugely, I've said this a million times now, very influential. Did you hear your sound spread into sort of the productions of Motown or other centers that were producing music at the time?
You know, I've been told that most of the singers, whether it been Marvin Gaye or whoever, I've been told as well, like Teddy Pendergrass likes all the things that I've done with the Drifters and afterwards. So I would imagine that a lot of the things that were done by myself and the Drifters did pour over to Motown, because you can still hear the softness of the things that they created that was very similar to the things that came out of Atlantic. So I too believe that they did pick up on that quickly and made a very successful company and some very successful acts through the following of the Leiber and Stoller arrangement and ways of handling strings, especially all the Supreme stuff. I mean, you can just, it's all over that, you know. Set me free, why don't you, babe? Get out my life, why don't you, babe? You don't really love me, just keeps me hanging on. You know, it's that same texture, you know. So I'm sure they were greatly influenced by what happened with Atlantic and through the producing and stuff of Jerry and Mike.
How do you think it was different, the Motown sound, from what you guys were doing?
I would imagine the difference between Motown and Atlantic was they stayed more to the roots of music. They used what we call the heavy bottom, That's the bass and the drums. And when Atlantic and Jerry and all of them had found a new niche for sound, they used just top level feelings in their music and left the bottom out as such. They didn't use the bass like in all the Motown things have some tremendous bass line, you know, especially the Temptational Four Top stuff, that heavy bass line. And Atlantic was doing just the reverse. Atlantic had done the reverse, so they found a way of getting the texture from Atlantic, but with the R&B bottom. So they matched those together perfectly.
Gonna go back over a couple things. There's a slightly new twist on this. Could you sing us a little of Stand By Me and talk about its power to how it's resonated over the years, its sort of timeless quality?
I think that the song "Stand By Me" is one of those songs that when someone asks me, "What was you thinking about, or what was you feeling about?" It's something that songwriters just write songs. It's like an artist that paints. They paint what they feel. It's not about how many of these paintings I'll sell. It's just how they feel at the moment. That's how I wrote "Stand By Me." And the song, to me, as I was writing, it was just a song. It's personal, of course, with its moments, but it wasn't. I didn't gear it to be as big. It's just huge. It's one of the most rewarding things to me as a songwriter. As a singer, it's okay, because singers got a different attitude. They're so whacked out, they don't know what they're doing. Half the time singers, they're spoiled too. I'll tell you other things about singing, but they're mostly spoiled. I'm a songwriter, so I'm okay. But when I wrote "Stand By Me" as a song, and to know that the song will probably be here for hundreds and hundreds of years to come, it's great, you know. It was just simple lyrics. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. It's just simple lyrics, but enough to connect. And I didn't realize that when I was writing it. It was just something that I felt like I wanted to say. And during those times, like in my early years as a writer, I could actually write a song in 10 minutes. Because all of a sudden the song is writing itself. I'm just putting down words. It just seemed each line that you put down flows with the other one. It's like writing a love letter. You don't think about it. It's something from the heart. You're writing it. It's how you feel. And when you finish, you put your signature on it and you mail it off, and that's it. And that's how "Stand By Me" was, really.
I'm going to move back into the Drifters. The Drifters had a very distinctive sound to their records.
Mm.
How would you define the Drifter style?
If there's a way to describe the Drifter sound, especially the Drifters that I was involved with, because the Drifters that was with Clyde's Drifters, as I call, when I call Clyde's Drifters, it's like Clyde McPhatter, Gay Hart Thrasher, and Bubba and all those guys, Bill Pinkney. They had the gospel set of Drifters, and we had the Drifters that had that velvet sound, because of the way Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller produced it. It had that touch of elegance, just enough to take it from the level of being extremely R&B up to class and good style. I would imagine we were the group that would have been behind Nat King Cole if we was up there, because we had that kind of good style and class behind the songs.
You were definitely going for a broader reach.
Yeah. I don't think we weren't doing it on purpose. And I think that's what made the magic happen. It's a different thing when you go into a studio and you record with the intent of going somewhere, and you're marketing yourself for that direction. We did it, and Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller did it because we were enjoying the freedom of expressing ourselves, and it happened like that. We just expressed ourselves in a way that No one else had done so, and I fell into it because that's the where they were. I was just following their lead. So because of that, and Atlantic was brave enough to allow them the freedom to play with that game. So we all kind of followed each other, and the world picked up on it and said, "Wow, where are these guys going?" And before you know it, they'd already opened their arms and say, "Hey, we like you. Come on in here."
Many people attribute sort of your early work with the Drifters and Leiber and Stoller's production as starting with what is now known as a sweet soul kind of sound. When they were bringing the instrumentation, as you said, all the people were coming into the studio with
Right.
you, and you were a voice among all these instruments. Did you feel like something new was happening when they were doing that? That you were establishing a whole new sound?
I would imagine after the first recording session with Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller and Atlantic Records, I began to realize that this is going to be like this for the rest of my life. And I knew that what they were doing was going to be successful, because with each session that we would do, it would get better and better and better. The songs would become better. The feeling of success was there, and we were all in the middle of that as well. And knowing that they had carte blanche to do what they were doing plus. And it gave me a feeling of confidence, because not only were they teaching me things, I must have been learning it well, because they didn't turn me down.
So it was a real feeling of excitement,
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah, a complete newness that everybody knew they were successful in.
Could you say that in a complete sentence? Because that was really...
I would imagine it was a complete newness that everyone knew they were successful in.
Great. The Beatles.
The Beatles.
The Beatles come in 1964, we all know.
Yes.
You've seen it a million times. What did you think of when you first saw them? Did you feel threatened by them, or?
When I first saw the Beatles, before they got here to America, I had a chance to. I was working in Europe a lot, especially in London, and I got a chance to meet them as kids, quite a few times. They would come to the concerts, and I knew their manager, Brian, and he was telling me about, I would love to get these kids to the States and da 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 da. So I said, great. And I didn't think at that time they would even be successful when they came to the States. But when I got home and I started hearing all this stuff about the Beatles are coming, and I said, I think I've met these kids. The Beatles are coming, the Beatles are coming. I said, I've met these kids. And when I saw them on the plane, I said, those are the same kids that was at all the concerts I was doing mostly. They came into this country and changed everything we've ever dreamed of being, artistically and musically, culturally as well. They, all of a sudden, for some reason in this country, at that time, we must have felt as if we was missing something, or we needed a new something. And whatever that void were, they fell right in the middle of it. They said, you don't know what you want, take this. And whoever started the campaign to bring them to America was the most brilliant mind that I think I would ever meet. Because it worked. It was extremely successful. I didn't realize how talented they were until maybe 2 years later. It was so much hype going on about them. And you have to allow for the fact that they came in at a time where the music that was being created by myself and the Drifters and people such as us were now beginning to take a back burner to this new British group and all that they were bringing over. And there was a bit of jealousy, because we were cut off at a time we was just getting ready to become stronger than strong ourselves. I mean, the song, all the signs were there that the music that was being created right here at home was going to be tremendously big. And then all of a sudden, these kids came along and stopped all that. And it was a strong pill to swallow. I think the only one that survived out of that thing was someone like James Brown, because he was so far to the left of what they were doing, it didn't affect him. But all the other ones that was using the soft touch of music was strongly affected by it. Even now, even to this very day, you still hear great influences of all the things that they've done in the music industry. Yeah.
Someone like James Brown had such an extreme sound that was so opposite from the smoothness of the sound that you were delivering. Wonder what it was that made him appealing to such a broad audience too.
Well, I would imagine the thing that made James Brown survive and was appealing because he had what all the blacks needed to keep them going. The Beatles had all of what the whites needed to keep them going. The thing that we had created with the Drifters and us was in the middle of all that. It was no separatism there. We had collected a people to listen to a music. But when they came along, there was area, because blacks can't grow their hair long and straight, and I forget that. So they came along with long, straight hair, and that happened. That changed the whole attitude of the music in a racial way. So James covered all of what was going on and what blacks felt that they needed musically to survive through the Beatles thing. And then the whites that said, hey, well, but look what we have. These kids are great, and look at their hair. And there's only 4 musicians, and they're brilliant. And they were screaming. The girls was fainting. So there was no competition in what we were doing in comparison to what they had done when they landed here. We couldn't compare to that if we tried for another 200 years. No way. Maybe if we would have had Michael Jackson. Maybe. But we didn't have him at that time, so we were stuck. We were caught completely off guard. They came over and just scooped us right up and just smoothed right through there.
And they were completely influenced by what you did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Sure. But that always happens. That's not new news. The people abroad always tend to take the best of what we have and come back through the back door, always say, and hit us with it. And then we wake up one day and say, I think I've heard that. Yeah, it was done by whoever, So that's been one of our weaknesses. We don't tend to hold on as they do there.